Hey there, and welcome to the Checkpoint blog. I'm Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking about Pokémon and if this is the beginning of the end for the franchise, or if Legends of Arceus represents a new chapter in its future. I know. It seems like all I do is discuss and talk about Pokemon and Marvel, but I promise you there is other stuff coming, I promise. But the reason you're seeing a lot of Marvel and Pokemon at the moment is because at the end of 2021 we had Hawkeye, we had Spider-Man, and then in Pokemon side we had Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl at the end of last year. And as we move into 2022, we've got Legends of Arceus, which comes out on the 28th of January. So for me, that's on Friday. I've covered a lot of Marvel. I had a lot of catching up to do, but now it's time for me to dip into my other passions. So let's try and keep this a bit shorter than last week, shall we? To put this into context as well, the upcoming Pokemon game and the current state of Pokemon is very much a point of contention within my friendship group. And I often find that any allies I have in defending the franchise, they're slowly dwindling, and the case of defending Pokemon is just getting harder and harder to do. Back in 2020, I wrote 2 posts as part of my sort of Pokemon journey. If you go to my blog, you'll be able to see part 1 and part 2, and they're linked in the blog as well. And these looked at the state of the franchise considering the release of Sword and Shield, as well as its DLC. So I'm hoping that this post will kind of serve as a spiritual successor and a part 3, one that I'd already planned on writing. I want to deal with the Pokemon community, and as well as the sort of the lapsed fans, all of who desperately want change. But at the other side as well, I want to sort of touch upon the sort of the massive weight of expectation the franchise is shouldering, and how arguably Game Freak look like they're buckling under the weight of it. I'm going to start with BDSP, or Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as these came out last year, and these were the first main series games to kind of come out since Sword and Shield. They are technically remasters or remakes of Diamond and Pearl games, which released in 2006. And when they were announced, there was an awful lot of backlash and nervousness around these games. Initially as well, and rightly so, it didn't seem to include any Platinum changes. Now, Pokemon Platinum was the 3rd game of the trio, which released a few years later in 2008. And what Pokemon Platinum did was it made the games a little bit harder. It added some more content, and obviously now that we can be released and now they're out in the wild, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl doesn't have any of that Platinum element to it. This was a real shame, especially for me, because personally it was one of my favourites. It's where I kind of got back into my Nuzlocke. It's where it really reignited my passion to play Pokemon. But even outside of that, it was a real missed opportunity, in my opinion, to push these games to be the best versions that they could be. Yes, BDSP added some new features and it's added some new post-game elements, but it still felt significantly easier than the Platinum counterpart would have done. And this ease of playing the games is a key point, because as the Pokemon community gets older, we expect to have a bit more of a challenge, especially seeing as we know how the standard formula works. And even lapsed players who haven't played recently will know how Pokemon works. So by not making it harder and not making it as interesting, you actually start to lose that traction with some of the older generation that play Pokemon. That isn't to say that people, myself included, haven't enjoyed their time with BDSP, but there was an expectation here, because the previous remaster and remake, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they took Ruby and Sapphire games, remade them, but then added new things. Like they added Mega Evolutions, they added a whole new post game. They brought Pokemon from previous and later generations into these games. And what this did is it compounded together and it made probably one of the best games in Generation 6. What you'll see here, though, is that this comes down to the expectation, because people were expecting BDSP to get the same treatment that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire got. And obviously it didn't. This was more true to terms as a remake. Pokemon is a huge franchise, and it's got a massive history, but as a result it's often bombarded with so many contradictory expectations. You've got the expectations from current fans, you've got the expectations from non-fans and lapsed players, and you've even got the expectation from Game Freak themselves. Who are these games aimed for? Who do we want to be targeting with these games? And actually, to a certain extent, it's through these varied expectations that we actually see the performance, the perception, and the reception of these games getting undermined because we generate our own expectations for these games, which probably were never ever going to be fulfilled in the first place. I'll get into it more as we go on, but I do want to make it clear that I'm not saying we shouldn't expect a level of standard and quality from a huge company like Game Freak, but I do think it's important that we contextualize our own expectations and keep an open mind where we can. One of the biggest criticisms of Pokemon games that you'll see, and it's not the only criticism, but it's probably the most prevalent that you'll see at the moment, is around the quality of their visuals. BDSP saw a art style change in which a lot of people were actually kind of wary of because it seemed unnecessary, and Sword and Shield got an awful lot of heat due to the simplistic textures and designs that were used, especially around the designs of their trees. The reason for this is because it's very easy to compare these, especially Sword and Shield's open areas, to the graphical quality of games such as Breath of the Wild. And I'll be honest, it's very hard to disagree with this point. Game Freak do not make the best looking games. That there is a fact. I do still believe that Sword and Shield was designed as a 3DS game and not a Switch game, meaning that it wasn't built to fully utilise and realise the Switch's power. But that argument doesn't work really for the current visual criticism we're getting for the new game Legends of Arceus. As I mentioned, that releases on the 28th of January, but there have been some lucky trainers out there who have received and got their hands on actual copies of the game, and they're sharing their footage on YouTube. Pokemon are obviously ramping up their marketing now as we go into the launch of this. And looking at all this footage together, I will admit, the quality of the world they've built is not something that will rival Breath of the Wild. It doesn't look great compared to what it could be or what the expectations were. And this is where it kind of comes back to expectation. If Nintendo can create an open world game like Breath of the Wild to such a level of quality on the Switch, then why can't Game Freak do the same and replicate that in a Pokemon game? And you know what? It is a fair challenge and one that isn't easy to defend. I will say that I think that Game Freak was slow on the uptake of the Switch, meaning that they probably don't have the experience or the ability in making these games at Nintendo, who for years before the Switch's release would have been focusing on this hardware. But that isn't really an excuse. They should really be focusing on creating better worlds, and if they haven't got the talent to do it themselves, they should be recruiting for that expertise. They should be collaborating with the experts who can assist on raising this quality. Legends, visually, still looks like the best Pokemon game that we've had released, but it isn't exactly industry leading. The problem is that by holding them to this level of expectations that it needs to look incredible can also detract from the positives that the game has, and it makes people immediately critical of it and the quality of the game itself. If the game looks bad, then surely it's going to play badly, right? Personally, I'm not actually too bothered by the overall look of the world, although it is disappointing that it doesn't meet my own personal expectations, because you could have had a much more immersive, detailed world rather than this what could potentially be seen as an open, emptier one. That said, the Pokemon models, they have been reworked. They look clean. They have mouths and eyes, whereas before they were more textured on. The combat looks much more connected in the fact that they actually physically connect with the opposing Pokemon. The moves look a lot better, and they have generated various biomes in which to explore. From what I've seen as well, the maps are huge. So, maybe there's to a certain extent that variety, and that variety of Pokemon models meant they had to sacrifice something which could have been graphics. I am way more excited by what they have added, though, than what it looks like. Because for me, it shows that they are really pushing to innovate and push this world and this franchise forward. It's almost like it's what is under the bonnet that matters, not how it looks. The open world concept where you can sneak up on a Pokemon and catch without a battle, or then engage it in a battle seamlessly in the overworld, looks incredibly exciting and cool, and actually moves and adds that depth to what the combat has been for 25 years. The fact that your trainer is involved in combat as well is something we haven't seen, and it adds that next level of challenge to the game. I actually feel like the content and enjoyability of the game is much more important as to how it looks. because for me, the visuals can be improved in future generations as long as a strong foundation of the game is built today. Graphics aren't always everything, and I know that I'll probably get moaned at for this comparison, but I've spent a lot of time playing Stardew Valley recently. The graphics on that game is, yes, it's art style, but they aren't, realistic. They aren't sort of detailed. And yes, Legends art style and graphical quality leave it wanting in comparison, but it doesn't mean that any of them are bad games because they aren't pushing the graphical limits we would potentially hope or expect. But this is it. It's the expectation, right? We expect a lot from Game Freak, and for a company that's been around for so long, rightly so. But we also can't crucify them on this one point alone. For me, there is a clear effort to innovate and push the series forward, something that fans and lap players have been crying out for. And actually, Legends of Arceus shows that there is a response and an awareness of this. So then, what's changed with Legends of Arceus, and does it give us a reason to believe? And I'm hoping to step away from the discussion around the visuals for a bit and talk about the game. Plenty of the lucky fans who have got their hands on the game and have been playing it for about a week now have said that this is the most fun they've had with a Pokemon game in decades. They're saying that they're going to struggle to go back to the previous games because of everything that Arceus brings to the table. That's everything from the details in the Pokemon to the combat to the world and the story. Everything just feels much more engaging and enjoyable and immersive than any of the previous games that we've had. The fact that there are veteran Pokemon players saying this is massive because many of these guys have been openly critical of the direction of the franchise. And to come out with this praise speaks to me more than the marketing itself. The game appears harder because you, the trainer, can be knocked out by direct attack from Pokemon. Multiple Pokemon can actually attack you and your Pokemon, making for chaotic battles. You're in 1v4 situations. Even the boss battles are meant to create this great deal of challenge, especially some of the later ones. You can use your party to knock down crafting materials from trees or break open sort of ore veins. You can seamlessly switch between traversing on the land, the air, the sea, and even simple things by just getting all 6 of your team members out and they just chill out around you. From what I've seen, they're really trying to ramp up this idea that this is your journey. That it's all about bringing that idea of a party journeying together. What you discover when you're roaming is your discovery, it's part of your own story, and that's something that for me is very important to me, more so than the graphics. For me, Pokemon's always been around the journey. Let's be honest, the story behind any Pokemon game makes no sense at all. The fact that you're the only trainer that can go from a beginner to a master in, frankly, a few days is just bizarre. The fact that you're a kid and you can do that and no one else seems to be able to get to the Elite Four is mind-blowing. But that isn't what Pokemon's about for me. That isn't the story that engages me. It's that sense of discovery and that personal team building that, it goes back to that days of me being a kid and watching the series where Ash was spending his time with his Pokemon. He was building it up, and your Pokemon team becomes as much of the game as as much as Ash's team does. Unfortunately, recent generations have made it easier to play these games, and it has then detracted from this sense of discovery, which has then meant that, as experienced Pokemon players, you find ways to make that challenge yourself through Nuzlocke playthroughs, or you go for something like shiny hunting, or even competitive play. But what Legends is doing is it's hopefully bringing us back to that idea of creating your own epic journey. So I'm going to caveat this, and I potentially should have done this at the start, but I am biased in this discussion. I love the franchise, and I give Game Freak the benefit of the doubt a lot because I play their game so much. Because for me, I can see the potential, but this is also forming part of my own expectation, and I change my expectation every time a Pokemon game is released. I don't speak for or represent the gaming community as a whole, and especially don't represent players my age. My expectations are driven by what I enjoy in these games, and I do my best to not compare these to other franchises, as I have a very unique expectation and experience with Pokemon. What I try to do is contextualize my expectation against what has come before in Pokemon, not what is out there currently. For example, I know that Breath of the Wild exists, and my expectation is that Breath of the Wild 2 should surpass itself. But Legends of Arceus, in my mind, isn't expected to surpass or emulate Breath of the Wild. Now, everyone I speak to has different views on this, though. And when you throw in time and money constraints, it is completely understandable why people will make these comparisons, because often they have to commit their time and money to one, not both of these games. It's at this point where that expectation becomes important, because if it fails to or looks to fall short of meeting your expectations, then frankly, it's not worth the investment. I understand why people are dubious about picking up Legends, and I appreciate why people are disappointed with the visuals, as better visuals have been created out there on the same console. But I'm really, really hoping that when the game comes out, it exceeds these expectations, and it proves that there is more to this game than just the average visuals. Not just for this game, but as a beginning of the redemption of the franchise, and a demonstration of what the franchise could, in reality, become. So what I've done as well is, if you're on the blog, you'll see that I've put a tweet in here, which to me I think represents just how fragile the expectation is towards Pokemon, and especially Legends has been. It's a very isolated amount, but you can see that in a store in Japan, on the single Sunday after the leaks, pre-orders increased for the game by 103 units. Yes, it is an incredibly small sample, but it goes to show that once there are some genuine hands-on being shared with this game, that people start to get excited for this again. It starts to surpass people's expectations or meet people's expectations, and people start buying it again. And actually, you could imagine that if you replicate this off across multiple markets and multiple retailers, Game Freak could have seen quite a boom in pre-orders. The other reason I find this quite interesting is because the opposite happened with BDSP. When that leaked and when everyone realised that there wasn't a lot to it, people started cancelling pre-orders. Even I did it. I mean, I was originally going to get the double pack so I could get both. And actually, I only ended up getting the single copy, which, in all honesty, I haven't done for generations. I normally will buy both copies, so I can have one main copy and then one challenge copy for Nuzlocke, etc. For BDSP, even I wasn't convinced enough that I only bought just the one. So I just thought it was quite interesting just to share that, because I think that it goes to show how people are changing their attitudes now that they've seen it. And actually, it makes sense if that is the case, because a lot of these leaks and a lot of the footage of people that have got their hands on this on the game, that footage isn't being taken down by Game Freak. Now, generally, they are quite hot on that, and they will take these leaks down. And I actually think they are feeling the benefit of this hands-on previews that they're getting. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. But with all that said, it is clear that many players' expectations are being surpassed with this game. Maybe because they had very little faith in Game Freak in the first place, or they were just doubtful of the premise and the direction of this game. But what I'm hoping is that this expectation breaking is shared by others following the release this week. Personally, I'm hoping that my expectations are at least met. And ironically, my expectations have been raised since I've seen the leaks and the footage that has been circling since that people have been sharing it. But it goes back to what I've said before. There is an appetite at Game Freak to innovate and push the series forward. So for me, we just need to manage our expectations to a certain extent while they play catch up. Hopefully Legends represents a beta test for things to come. And when this format and formula is rolled out to later games, we will see what the potential Pokemon has. And don't get me wrong, there are people out there who will be saying, well, they shouldn't have to play catch up. We shouldn't have to temper our expectations because other companies have done it better already. And frankly, that they've had their chance. And all of these are true. Unfortunately for me, I'm always willing to let them try and invigorate the franchise. But I fully understand that there are plenty of fans out there who have given Pokemon a chance. They've tried it time and time again. And do you know what? No amount of nostalgia or tweaking the game will be enough to save the franchise in their eyes. And that's okay. Hopefully, though, Legends provides the key to buying more time for those on the fence to give us a taste of things to come. just as we round this up, rumor has it by the, who we call the Chinese Riddler, who is a Twitter a user who has been incredibly accurate in leaking the footage and news around the footage for Legends, and has been proven accurate time and time again for other games. He said that we might be seeing Generation 9 landing this year, with an announcement expected between February and April, with a release in November. If Legends is as good as fans are claiming, and they can translate the aspects of Legends that people are excited about into the next main series installment, we could be in for a real treat. However, just to remember, even I have limited patience, and if it looks like the feedback and enjoyment from Legends isn't being put into the next installment, then even I will be concerned. For example, I was willing to give them a chance after Sword and Shield, and so far my expectations have been met with what I've seen for Legends. But if it's one of these things where, because of their development cycles and their almost unwillingness to back their own design, means that it's not going to be implemented until the game following the next release, so maybe 2024, 2025, then that, for me, isn't good. So then, in summary, you may or may not have noticed that I am quite excited for this game. The hype, the discussion, the footage, it's all got me incredibly excited. And I cannot wait to get my hands on it, to be honest. One of the things I wanted to get across, though, was that I do find that we are often limited by our own expectations. I was excited when they announced Legends, and I was wary when they announced BDSP. And I'll be honest, I was let down by BDSP. It isn't bad, it just doesn't add anything new to my Pokemon experience. And like many, I was expecting more of the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire treatment. Ultimately, it failed to meet my expectations. As a result, my excitement and my confidence in Legends ebbed away. But I was quietly hopeful that Legends would become the game that would reignite that spark that Pokemon has, and show that there was hope yet for real change within the franchise. And so far, from what I've seen, this seems to be the case. The graphics in Legends, though, have been a huge sticking point. And I do understand this issue because ultimately it isn't the level you would expect from a AAA game. But I'm hoping that once people get their hands on the game, it can redeem not just itself as a game, but the faith that Pokemon has a direction that is worth following. There will be people who still don't like it and don't agree, and that is fine. But I do hope that people give it a fair shot. As mentioned, this game also represents a final chance for me, because if the game turns out good, and it's as great as people are saying, but they don't implement the changes and the positive aspects of the game into further games, then it is apparent they don't really understand what their players and their audience wants. For example, Pokemon Let's Go gave us so many great stuff, but not all of them have been seen in future games. Luckily, Shinies in the Overworld is coming back in Arceus, but it was notably absent from Sword and Shield. We are yet to be able to get any of our Pokemon out and just ride them. We could do that with Charizard, we could do it with Arcanine and Let's Go Pikachu, but we haven't been able to do that again. I'm hoping that Arceus marks a turning point for the franchise and not just a one-off sort of spin-off sort of deal. But until we see more in terms of what's to come, hopefully this year, this has given me more faith in Game Freak that they have plans to move in a new direction and that we will start seeing some more truly incredible Pokemon games in the future. Now, next week, I will be reviewing Legends of Arceus. I will be hopefully receiving my copy this weekend so I can get some decent time in over the weekend, get that review written up, and I'll be referring back to this blog post as well, just to see, has it met my expectations? Is there any room for improvement? And, how am I feeling about Legends of Arceus now that I've actually had my own hands on? I'm also going to be streaming it as well, so definitely move over to my Twitch channel just to see when I'm streaming that. That'll be Sunday, Monday, and Thursday. And yes, the next blog will be out on the Wednesday. So until then, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will speak to you next time.